than a year in, and still this war gives up fresh horrors. The sense of panic and powerlessness, not for what people have escaped, but for what they can see. In the wall of flames, those that can't be reached. The blaze sparked by an Israeli strike on a tented encampment for displaced people in the grounds of central Gaza's main hospital. Israel said it was targeting a Hamas command center in the compound. There were apparent secondary explosions, popping sounds among the flames. 4 people were killed here, dozens wounded, the flames ravaging a section of tightly packed, flammable, improvised shelters. Among the debris, exploded gas canisters, fueling the nightmare that so many woke into.
As you see, the fire was massive. People were on fire. People were on fire. And the civil defense guys couldn't reach them. However much bombing we've seen, this was the most horrific night.
Elsewhere, a mother and her 10-year-old son, shrapnel still lodged in his abdomen.
Here I'm sitting and I don't know how I'm going to sleep tonight. From dawn, I've been going from tent to tent, looking for a blanket to cover my children. I couldn't find one.
For years, over multiple wars, Gaza has suffered a mental health crisis among its children. But what do you call a year of this? Crisis hardly seems adequate. And still it goes on. Drive, drive, they shout. This ambulance crew had just picked up wounded from a strike on a school, paramedics and patients alike injured in the blast as they race for hospital. This is Jabalia, subject now to 12 days of near constant assault. Israel says it's targeting Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but at a level not seen in months.
We cannot do our work properly. It's very dangerous. The strike hit just in front of us. If we'd been going any faster, it would have hit us directly.
Inside the hospital, an injured child brought in, one of so many caught up in Israel's latest attacks. As well as today's school strike in Jabalia, there was another on a UN food distribution center here, killing 10 people. Jabalia is in the far north of Gaza, well within the territory bounded by Israel's military road, slicing through to the coast and dividing the strip in two. The United Nations says no food aid has entered the north since the start of this month.
This is a part of Gaza that, as you recall, several months ago was already on the brink of famine. So we really fear for the lives and for the safety, and are deeply concerned about the suffering of the population that's trapped inside Jabalia right now.
The Associated Press reports that Israel's Prime Minister is considering a plan promoted by a group of former generals to seal off northern Gaza, instruct civilians to leave and starve out remaining Hamas fighters. An Israeli army spokesman has denied that, saying the latest evacuation orders for Jabalia were not part of any such plan. But the renewed attacks will delay, if not prevent, plans to expand the UN polio vaccination program, which was due to move north in the coming weeks. And even in central Gaza, it's under pressure. A school in Nusayrat camp, due to be a vaccination center, was itself attacked late last night, with more than 20 killed. Among them, 1-year-old Yaman and his mother. Theirs among the funerals today at the Al-Aqsa hospital amid the ashes and smoke of last night's fire.
He was born in the school and was martyred in the school. To God we belong and to God we return. He has seen nothing of life. They had to beg for clothes so he could be dressed, so they could cover him and dress him. What are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do with our lives? Where are we to go? Where are we to hide our children?
Questions asked for so many months now, still unanswered.
Harry Forster reporting. Well, Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is in a security cabinet meeting in Tel Aviv amid continued speculation over a potential strike against Iran. Israel also pledged a forceful response against Hezbollah in Lebanon after a drone attack near Haifa killed 4 Israeli soldiers and injured dozens. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Porrick O'Brien, joins us from Jerusalem. Porrick.
Another day of air raid sirens and interceptions here in Israel. And as you well know, Krish, people pretty much carry on regardless, safe in the knowledge that this giant comfort blanket in the sky, Israel's missile defense system, will protect them. Well, yesterday we got a painful reminder that that system is not impregnable. A drone from Hezbollah flew in over the sea and hit a base about an hour and a half northwest of Jerusalem here. Benjamin Netanyahu visited that base and some of the injured this afternoon and said, quote, "We will continue to strike Hezbollah without mercy everywhere in Lebanon, including in Beirut." But it is the prospect of another attack by Iran that is dominating so much of the international political bandwidth. Remember that missile barrage launched at Israel 2 weeks ago. Well, just like last night, the cabinet are meeting as we speak to discuss what form Israel's retaliation will take. The soldiers' mess hall was full of recent recruits, rookies having dinner yesterday evening, preparing to go to war. Then war came to them. A drone launched by Hezbollah from Lebanon got through Israel's air defense system and came down through the roof of the cafeteria here. 4 young soldiers were killed, all of them 19 years old. Dozens were injured, 7 of them seriously. It's the largest loss of life by the army here away from the front line since October the 7th. Also, it's the Golani Brigade base, a famous infantry group in Israel. We went there this morning, young men who'd been inside the dining area yesterday, cleaning up the debris today. This soldier was in the room, agreed to be interviewed if we didn't show his face.
Saw people injured, you know, all the tummy open, people screaming.
Did you know any of those young men?
I knew the one he was working in the kitchen. The first one I thought. We're gonna kill all the Lebanon and Iran.
You what?
We're gonna kill all the Hamas, Lebanon. We're gonna kill them.
So according to an initial investigation by the IDF, 2 drones approached Israel at around the same time yesterday evening. The Navy picked up the first one, intercepted that and took it out. The second one, though, was initially detected by the Israeli Air Force. A number of jet fighters were scrambled to try and take that one down, but they lost it at some point and it struck the base behind me, killing those 4 young soldiers. The IDF say they're going to investigate why they lost track of that drone and also, crucially, why it appears that the air raid siren system didn't sound at the time. This is at its heart a tragic loss of these young men's lives, but it is also a source of acute embarrassment for the IDF. On our way back to Jerusalem this morning, the air raid siren sounded and Israel's missile defense system intercepted a number of incoming rockets. Drones like the one that hit the base with their unpredictable flight pattern pose a particular type of challenge to this system. And further north, in Israel's 3rd largest city, Haifa, around 10 projectiles intercepted. In a town close by, a parked car was hit. Hezbollah declared this morning that Haifa would increasingly become a target. 2 weeks ago, it was Iran itself which launched a barrage of ballistic missiles at Israel, which vowed to retaliate, likely to happen soon. And when Iran reacts to that, Israel's air defense system could be tested to its limits. In anticipation of that, the big guns are coming. Yesterday, the Pentagon officially announced that it's sending a sophisticated anti-ballistic missile system, along with up to 100 US troops, to operate it on the ground in Israel. That's significant. It's unlikely that Israel's retaliation will come before that system is operational, but it also introduces the possibility of US troops being targeted. Earlier today, and different ordnance in the sky. The gun volley at the funeral of Sergeant Alon Amitai, one of the soldiers killed at the base. His mother, in tears, embraces her mother. Sounds of weeping echoed by thousands throughout this region, through the generations.
Warwick O'Brien reporting. Now, there have been more attacks across Lebanon with at least 21 people killed in an Israeli airstrike on a building in a mostly Christian area in the north of the country. And European leaders have again declared that any deliberate attacks on UN peacekeepers go against international humanitarian law. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilson, is in Beirut. Lindsay.
There's a lot of tension here tonight as everybody waits for that Israeli retaliation for the Hezbollah attack that Porrick has just reported. They know it's coming. They don't know when. More tension too because Israel is quite clear they want to push the UN peacekeepers out of southern Lebanon into the north. 5 peacekeepers injured over the weekend. And this morning, an Israeli attack on a Christian village far from the Hezbollah stronghold in the south, right up in the north of Lebanon. 21 people killed. We don't know who they were targeting. Maybe somebody from Hezbollah who had gone into that area. The Israelis haven't said. Under these circumstances, with this degree of tension and fear, no wonder that anyone who can in Lebanon is fleeing. Refugees twice over, from Syria to Lebanon a decade ago, and now back again, negotiating the crater at the border left by an Israeli bomb. On the Lebanese side, aid workers are giving the children identity bracelets in case they get lost. This family is now divided, the younger children leaving for fear they'd be killed in Lebanon, but the eldest son staying behind for fear he'd be conscripted into the Syrian army.
في عالم ماتت وفي عالم بدها تموت وفي عالم بعدها عصيانه مش عم تقدر تطلع بالمناطق جوا. نحن كنا بالغربي بعلبك يعني هنيك في قصف وفي ضرب وفي يعني اللي عم يطلع اللي ما عم يطلع عم يضل.
The crater is more difficult to traverse if you're carrying the most precious and delicate of cargo. On the other side she rests and we get to meet Ali, aged just 22 days. One of the youngest victims of this new war. More than 320,000 Syrians have crossed back since Israel started bombing Lebanon 3 weeks ago. The Red Crescent is on hand to help those who can't walk or who've suffered injuries. But they'll need more help in Syria, a country brought to ruin by war. The Israeli strike hasn't stopped the refugees from crossing, but that was never the point. They struck here to stop large quantities of weapons going from Syria across the border to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now they can only bring across small amounts of weapons through the mountains. That's much more difficult. A few miles away, about 100 Lebanese families have taken refuge in a school. Amongst them, Hassan and Zahra. He's Iraqi, so they married in Baghdad, but then came to her country for the honeymoon.
صار ضرب حد ضرب قوي يعني ليلتها صبحنا الصبح ما بقينا بالبيت فلينا.
هذا شيء يعني ما جينا فيها لهون الواحد بيتجوز بيروح بينبسط بيعمل شهر عسل برات هون مش بالأزمة هاي اللي صارت معنا.
Many are afraid that wherever they take refuge in Lebanon, they'll be endangered by the presence of Hezbollah. Israel, they say, doesn't care how many innocent Lebanese get killed for each Hezbollah member it targets.
نحن بأمان بإذن الله نحن بأمان بس منخاف إنه يكون في شيء إنه اختراق بضل واحد متخوف يعني بضل بس الحمد لله نحن هون بأمان نحن برعاية الأمم المتحدة نحن مش تابعين لولا حزب هون نحن هون برعاية الأمم المتحدة بس والجمعيات ما دخل حزب الله هون فيه.
The Lebanese are suffering, Lama thinks, because of a war which they didn't start and in which they have no say.
نحن الوضع عنا مش منيح. شو بحاول اتأقلم بالشيء. هيك عم بتضل اتابعها بعيني بس مش قادرة اعمل شيء. والله نحن بهيدي الحرب والله في كتار غيري ضد الحرب بس ما قادرين نعبر ولا قادرين نحكي بس انا حابة اوصل صوتي للعالم انه العالم نحن بس بدنا السلام بس بدنا السلام ما بدي اكل ولا بدي شرب ولا بدي شيء بس بدنا نعيش بسلام.
UNICEF and other aid agencies are doing what they can to relieve suffering here as in Gaza, But the war is escalating and the humanitarian needs seem endless.
We need a ceasefire and an end to this madness. UNICEF can support the humanitarian side. We will advocate for the ceasefire, but it has to stop.
ليش بدنا نموت؟ منا حابين نموت بكير نحن. لا عندي ولادي بحبهم كثير وأنا بدي أعيش كمان.
Back on the border, more refugees are seeking safety. But Israel is targeting Iranian assets across the region, in Syria, Iraq and Yemen, as well as Lebanon. As this war widens, nowhere is safe.
Lindsay Hilson, well, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, the Labour MP Emily Thornberry, joins us now from Westminster. Good evening. As we speak tonight, Israel has hit a school, a hospital, a food distribution centre. It's fired on UN troops in Lebanon and is said to be considering starving northern Gaza as a way of hitting Hamas. Do you think there should be any red lines for Britain's political support of Israel?
It's very difficult to process the films that you've just been showing, which has such suffering from so many different angles, so many different facets. It's absolutely appalling to see it. I mean, our principle is that that Israel has a right to defend itself, but we've always said that it has to do that within the confines of international law, and it has to be proportionate. All civilian life is equal, and to see the suffering that is happening at the moment is, I mean, there is universal condemnation of it.
But it's that policy, isn't it, of both supporting its right to self-defence, but then warning it or calling for ceasefire and warning it about humanitarian law that isn't working. Do you think, there's a letter tonight, you've probably seen it being circulated by 5 MPs, including your former colleague Jeremy Corbyn, asking the government precisely this question. Is there anything Israel can do that would mean Britain's political and diplomatic support for Israel should be withdrawn?
The question I actually think should be asked is, how do we get this to stop? What we need to do is work collectively to get this to stop, and that is what is necessary. I'm not really interested in gestures. What I'm interested in is making sure that the continued invasion of Lebanon and the attacks in Lebanon stop, that there is a ceasefire in Gaza, that there is not the cutting off of the top third of Gaza, which looks like the general's plan is, that you cut off the top third of Gaza, you tell everybody they have to move, and if they don't move, then they are presumed to be combatants and can either be starved or killed.
Do you agree that that would be a war crime if northern Gaza is starved?
Well, it is a war crime to forcibly remove a population from one part of a country to another. It is a war crime to deliberately starve people, of course. And any war crimes that are being committed, we will need to make sure go before the courts, and the courts can decide who has committed war crimes. There are war crimes on all sides, it seems to me, during this conflict. There are war crimes that have been committed by Hamas, by Iran. I mean, on all sides. The accusations fly in all directions, but we need it to stop. And that is the most important thing. And across the world, is there a country that is in favour of this continuing? We have to make sure this stops.
But that's the point, isn't it? When you say you're interested in trying to stop it, it appears to be the case that Britain has no purchase on that at all. And the only things that it could do get dismissed, as you have just done now, as gesture politics.
No.
These are the only levers Britain has in truth, aren't they?
I think that what we need to do is we need to work together as an international, as a group internationally. I think that the bottom 18 miles of Lebanon has a United Nations force that is, at the moment, it would seem, on the face of things, being attacked. The European Union has been right to condemn that. There's more than, I think, 600 Spanish, 600 French, 1,000 Italians. There are from 50 different countries. UNIFIL collects its people. I think there might be one from Britain. But there is an international force there, and it must not be removed, because if it is removed, then it is simply a matter of moving the eyes and ears away, international eyes and ears away from that area, and giving the Israelis free rein.
Emily Thornberry, thank you very much for joining us.